Welcome back, everyone. I'd also like to welcome back, and once again, thanks for that Q&A session. We heard a lot of interesting questions, and it was great to get examples from other countries around Australia and their involvement in joint management. Right now, this session's about where to from here. I'm going to welcome back Dr. Jose Kelpers from YMAC and Dr. Bill Cruz from the Pew Charitable Trust, who presented yesterday and provided an overview of joint management in WA. Today, they will be discussing the next steps that will follow this forum. After this, there is a time we'll once again open up the forum for any final questions or comments from the attendees. And then we'll just open it up to Dr. Jose and Dr. Bill Cruz. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Before we go through the summary of the takeaway messages from this forum, I would like, on behalf of YMAC and the CEO of YMAC, to thank all the presenters and attendees who have joined us yesterday and today for being part of and contributing to this forum. We appreciate it. It is no small undertaking to participate in a multi-day event. And for those presenting, this commitment was extended to having to prepare materials and partake in other preparations in the lead up. So we are really grateful for the efforts everyone has made, so thank you. A big thank you also to the engine room of this forum, what we call the back end. So Georgia, Cara, and their team at KE Creative, our brilliant chair facilitator, Bill Bennell, and the YMAC communications team, with special mention to Terry O'Neill, who has worked tirelessly to make this event a success. So YMAC took on the role of organizing this forum in response to requests for increased information sharing and coordination in the joint management sector, particularly in Western Australia. However, we also knew there were important and valuable lessons to be learned from other parts of the country too. As well-known joint management expert Tony Bauman highlighted yesterday, the last conversation around joint management at a national or state level was 10 years ago. And while it is apparent that there remain a lot of the same outstanding issues and concerns, this forum has also provided a wealth of examples highlighting the progress made and the potential benefits and outcomes that can be achieved through good joint management planning and practice. On behalf of YMAC and the forum supporters, Country Needs People and Pew Charitable Trusts, we hope that participants have found presentations and discussions across these 2 days of benefit, and that similar efforts will continue in the future. So to help close things out, Bill and I are now going to provide a brief summary of reflections and takeaways and discuss some of the next steps to be taken following the forum. So I think I'll ask Bill to go on with this part of the wrap-up.
Thanks, Jose, and to mirror all your comments about thanking everybody. It's been a great team bringing it together, especially Terry, and thank you, Bill, also. I've got some sort of summary notes. It's a big country, lots of views. I've tried to capture everything. Jose's done a good job of capturing it, really, and noting that we'll send a document around for comment after the forum, so these things aren't locked in stone, these observations and summary comments. The first one, it seems there's a real clear need to continue the conversation, to have regular events, and to establish a community of practice. I think there really is a bit of a disconnect nationally around the community of practice working in joint management, and also the community of practice working in IPAs, and to bring those communities together and to have a regular national forum or more communication would be a really good thing. It's really clear that we need more information sharing and traditional owners talking to each other about joint management across the country. I think also it's probably important to set aside some of the ideologies around this discussion. Joint management's good, joint management's bad. or of sort of it being binary, one or the other. There seems to be a real diversity of models and flexibility in how they're applied around the country. That's to do with ranger employment policies, and that works not just with joint management, but also IPAs and other models. And it seems to be it's a bit of a journey, so that there's adaptation throughout the whole life of joint management and the partnership. So you check, you monitor, you might change your employment model. And from the territory examples where it's been going for a very long time, there seems to have been a lot of adaptation over the years, or some, or ongoing. There are networks. I know the ones in WA, Kimberley Ranger Forum, Indigenous Desert Alliance. It's a Pilbara Cultural Land Management project, a program. We need to utilise these more to sort of transcend some of the rivalries that seem to exist around joint management and IPAs and between different state and Commonwealth regimes. So I'm kind of mirroring what I already said, really, which is we need more networks for this stuff. Moving on, I think it's been really clear that joint management doesn't meet all of traditional owners' aspirations around self-determination. I'm kind of saying what's so obvious. That IPAs certainly fill some of that gap as an Indigenous-led conservation regime, but there's potential for all of these things to work together to actually make a better picture around the country. And I'm sure as a community of practice, we can keep talking about that. It's very much a work in progress, this joint management space. It's not static. There's amendments happening all the time in different states and territories. In August, we had an amendment here in WA for joint management or joint vesting of marine parks, as well as allowing cultural management zones in the zoning of marine parks, which is a huge step forward. There's lots of creativity and mixing and matching of models all the time. I'm aware of an example in WA where some joint management funding is going to be used to assist with managing surrounding pastoral stations, to assist with managing the park. We talked about whole of country cultural management plans or healthy country plans before the joint management process. I think that's a really clear message. That is best practice nationwide and needs to happen as much as possible. It's a foundational step. But also, we shouldn't get lost on what it's called. Sometimes they're called health through country plans or country plans or whatever it may be. It's the point of having a plan for the whole of your country and what you want to do with it, and where joint management or an IPA or economic development or other land uses fit in, and then also articulating all those cultural values from land so that you get the best out of whatever regime you're in. IPAs, we talked about cross tenure countrywide conservation model, and I want to thank the Queensland crew who spoke, who really made that very clear about the benefits, and it was a bit of an eye-opener to me. The other issue there is, of course, though, it depends where you are in a state and territory, what underlying tenure you might have. So in WA, we have IPAs on pastoral lease, but we still have lock gates. Where people would like to have an IPA on a pastoral lease, there might still be a lock gate. So it gets quite hard to implement that model on the existing tenure. It's quite clear that complex models are possible. I think the Yarrow example and Yungamata example that was discussed yesterday, that you can customize things locally. We don't have to get stuck with a blueprint. But that is a challenge for government agencies. I'm aware in the Kimberley, they're pretty flexible. It sounds like they're certainly not as flexible in Queensland and possibly the Territory or in parts of Australia. But I don't know. It also seems to be changing. Resourcing is an issue. We're still in an under-resourced area in terms of joint management, with more resources needed. Some people talked about the challenge of having different regimes over the top of each other. PVC, so a native title corporation with funding for joint management, but then one with also having funding for an IPA, and those two different regimes. and sometimes they can clash or just be a poor fit, and there needs to be work on that. Capacity building is the other one. There's clear need for sector development in Indigenous land and sea management generally, whether it's through joint management or IPAs across the whole sector, and particularly for to keep and maintain senior Indigenous staff. One point came up was in WA was the need for the involvement of fisheries in coastal areas, and for joint management to be a partnership with the state-based conservation agency in fisheries. And I think lastly, just that there's still room for advocacy. Groups are still pushing the boundary of what joint management might be, and what equity might look like, especially where there's old parks and reserves and strong native title rights, and to push the dial on what self-determination means in terms of owning land, managing it jointly or managing it solely, essentially Indigenous land management in all its forms working well. I think that's it from me. I might hand back to Jose. Hopefully that was a helpful summary, and we'll circulate it later on. And I forgot to say, for some of those who've joined today, a lot of these things came up yesterday. If they sound a bit random and new today, it's because they were discussed yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So obviously, these points we've just presented are the key highlights. There will be more. There will be more. So what we're going to do from now on, we're going to look at, again, at the presentations and the discussions, and so we'll review all those elements, and emerging themes and concepts will be identified. And those different elements will inform the development of a draft outcomes report. So the draft outcomes report will be circulated to the participants, prior to finalization, to make sure that there is some consensus around what is reflected within that draft report. So once finalized, the report will be made public and shared more broadly, including with government. It is intended that the outcomes of this forum, presented in the final report, will go on to help influence and inform best practice guidelines, policies, and practical approaches, etc. So there is a clear need for having more of those of these forums, these conversations, as we say. So it's really important to build that momentum. As I said before, we've had 10 years without a state level or a national-wide discussion around joint management. So we have some suggestions here. They are not, comprehensive, but we heard that DBCA in WA are interested in organizing a 2-day on-country meeting on the specific topic of joint management. Maybe the representative from DBCA would be able to confirm that, or if it's still on the table. We also know that every year IATSIS organize summits, what used to be called a National Native Title Conference. There could also be a special stream dealing with not just joint management, but overall the Indigenous land and sea management topics. So that would include joint management. There's a possibility for Parks Australia. Peter was mentioning that there's been a discussions between the heads of national parks in Australia, that could be something that Parks Australia could take the lead on, or maybe the Department of Environment or NRAA, to have those kinds of regular forums. I think it's really important because, as we have highlighted yesterday in our presentation with Bill, a lot is going to happen in the next few years, with some significant funding coming from the Commonwealth, from the states as well, and obviously with the pressure of having more and more conservation reserves in WA and elsewhere in Australia due to international commitments. It's really a space to watch. Advocacy groups like Country Needs People or Pew have also a role to play potentially in organizing those kind of forums, or maybe helping or lobbying on governments to make sure that those forums happen. And then lastly, it's also important to have international exchanges with rangers. It's already been happening. I know that some rangers from WA and I think even the Northern Territory went a few years ago to Kenya to have some exchanges with rangers there, and also with Canada, where we've mentioned that before. It seems that they want to copy and adapt the IPA model in Canada. So I think there is a lot of opportunities there to build that community of practice at the state level, at the national level, and even at the international level. That's it from me.
Thank you, Jose and Bill. So I'm just going to do a final wrap up now. Just a couple of personal reflections about the past 2 days. It's been really great. Yesterday we saw quite a wide range of joint management processes all across WA, and with today having more of that national perspective of what's going on across Australia. As Jose and Bill did sum up, it's over the course of the 2 years, if anything that comes out of this discussion and forum today is hopefully that regular connection of people across the country talking about joint management, considering on a national level it has been 10 years since this type of discussion has come up. Please do remember, inside of the forum here is that kind of like meeting room networking opportunity where you can connect with people all over the country. Please utilise that. I want to thank all the presenters involved and the participants for the time and sharing their ideas across the 2 days. Also want to thank YMAC for organising and hosting the forum. And again, thanks to Country Need People and Pew Charitable Trust for their support for this event. Just want to remind attendees they will be able to access the recordings from the forum sessions once they're uploaded and logged up into the portal. Again, I hope everyone's enjoyed and found value in the presentations offered and the discussions it's had throughout this joint management forum. As just shared before, a draft report will be developed shortly and circulated to attendees for comment prior to being shared more broadly. And we look forward for that, that additional input into that report. Should attendees have any questions or feedback, they are more than welcome to contact YMAC staff, namely Dr. Jose Culpers, who presented on both days and heads up the YMAC Land and Sea Management Unit out of its Geraldton offices, or even Project Officer Terry O'Neill, who's been actively working behind the scenes today. And I thank you for all your help, Terry, whose contact information was provided previously in all email correspondence, and is available on YMAC's website on the dedicated Joint Management Forum page. So lastly, thanks again to all the attendees that came together today, and once again, the presenters. Hopefully everyone will keep in touch, learn from each other, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye. Bye.